So good afternoon, everybody. This is RCEA Board Clerk Lori Chiqueta with some housekeeping announcements. So for today's meeting, there's some changes here at the Wharfinger building. We still have the mics, which will be on throughout the meeting, but we have in addition some handheld microphones, and that's just to amplify for people who are here in the room. We were wondering if, well, some staff were having a hard time hearing other people just speaking. So if anybody, like any of the directors or anyone seated out there is having a hard time, don't hesitate to just raise your hand. And then we'll pass a microphone over and then so everybody can hear both online and here at the Wharfinger. So if you are participating in the public comment period, please come to the podium if you're here at the Wharfinger, and all staff reporters, please come to the microphone so that the microphone there can pick up your voice. Online participants, click the raise hand button in your webinar controls. Press *9 to raise your hand, *6 to unmute if you're on the phone. And then please remember to raise your hand early so that staff can see you and will call on you. We won't miss you. Emailed comments are being accepted and have been submitted to publiccomment@redwoodenergy.org. And public comment period is open until chair calls that public comment period closed. And for remote participants, if you are having a hard time, if your connection is disrupted, please notify us if you can by calling or texting 707-382-7336 or by emailing publiccomment@redwoodenergy.org. And that's all for housekeeping.
Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. I'd like to call the June 26, 2025 meeting to order. Of the RCEA Board of Directors meeting to order. Do we need a roll call?
Yes. Oh, Director Arroyo.
Here.
Director Bauer.
Here.
Director Diaz from Fortuna is absent, and representing the Fortuna point of view in discussion today is Mayor Mike Johnson.
Here.
Director Garachi.
Here.
Director Jorgensen.
Here.
Director Ramos is absent today. Director Scafani.
Here.
Director Schaefer.
Here.
Director Tuttle.
Here.
Director Wilson.
Here.
Vice Chair Wu. There is a quorum.
Excellent, thank you. Number one is roll call. We don't have anybody participating remotely on the remote director participation. Item 2 is reports from member entities. Do we have anything? Natalie.
I got a chance to go tour the geysers in, well, it's in Lake Sonoma and a little bit of Mendocino County. Mendocino County actually had arranged a tour that I was able to squeeze in on. And it was really just fascinating. Most of the day, we spent most of the day traveling around in the Mayacamas Mountains and looking at facilities. I just was not really fully aware of the scale of those facilities and just how, not only how extensive it is with, I think 13 independent operating plants that are part of the whole system, and hundreds of wells. And then they do, injection into the geothermal wells of treated wastewater from both Sonoma and Lake County. So it was a really interesting system. We get power from there, and it was just really educational. I would highly recommend doing a tour. They don't do so many. They do a public tour every month, and then they arrange special tours under circumstances that allow for that. So it's a little bit. It takes some planning. I just lucked out and didn't do a lot of planning and managed to get on a tour, but I would recommend it to anyone who's interested. It does take pretty much a full day, and they primarily do them on Fridays. So very, very informative, and that was the main thing that I wanted to report on.
Question?
Yes.
Is there ability to expand the operation, or is it kind of like they've maxed it out?
They're continuing to expand. It does sound like Calpine. I didn't realize this. They acted like everyone knew this, but they were like, well, of course, you're recently acquired by Constellation, which I had never heard of, nor did I know that they were being acquired. But anyway, they were talking about their business. And so there might be some changes there. So I'm not sure if they're going to continue to expand, but they're actively digging wells right now. So it seems like they're planning to continue expanding, and they've sort of built on since 1960. There've been plants developed by a number of different entities, and then all kind of under the Calpine umbrella now. Mendocino County does have like a geothermal opportunity area that they're exploring geothermal development in addition to what's currently developed. So there do seem to be some more opportunities for that. And then Calpine / Constellation, whatever that kind of merger is looking like. They also have other power generation and storage facilities. So they are doing battery storage projects as well. So that was interesting to kind of learn about. They also do like natural gas.
And one last question.
Yeah.
How many megawatts is it? You know, any rough idea?
I took a picture of the thing that told me that. Sorry, let me.
That's all right. I'm sure I could look it up too. I was just curious.
It was pretty surprising. I'm sorry, I don't think I have it handy. Oh, wait a minute. I'm just going to leave you in suspense. I don't know for sure, but I'd be happy to get a little more. I have some handouts that they gave me that I could scan and send to y'all, or send to staff to send out.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
I do have a lot about the mileage of pipelines because that's what I kept asking about. It's just really extensive, like, because it's steam going to turbines at different plants, but they're piping steam all over the dang place. Like it didn't seem possible for it to be that efficient. And I just had a ton of questions about the steam piping. So that's what they primarily see. It's just that.
Well, thanks for sharing. Anyone else to report out? Okay. Well, we will move on to item 3, ceremonial items. Dana, can you come to the podium, please? I'm going to read a proclamation. I think most of us know they're going to retire, which is a sad day for us all. But in honor of that, this proclamation honoring 19 years of dedicated service by Dana Boudreau. Whereas Dana Boudreau joined Redwood Coast Energy Authority in 2006 and devoted 19 years of outstanding service to RCEA, demonstrating excellence in his many roles from program manager, director of operations, and finally, director of infrastructure planning and operations, all while continually upholding the values and mission of RCEA. And whereas Dana led the Redwood Coast Airport microgrids development, coordinating many partners in this complex, first of its kind project, from conception and funding through construction, completion, and long-term operation. And whereas Dana helped identify and mitigate the many financial, policy, and technical risks RCEA's Community Choice Energy Program faced during its launch and early operation years while serving on RCEA's Energy Risk Management team. And whereas Dana developed information technology infrastructure, policy, and procedures to raise RCEA from a loose work group to one utilizing a modern and secure corporate network. And whereas Dana pioneered the Energy Watch small business direct install program's early years, always pushing for comprehensive efficiency projects beyond the low-hanging measures to avoid stranded savings. When the CFL sweeps team's cartwheels wore out from going door to door, he crafted replacement wheels out of wood. And whereas in his operations role, Dana made countless weekend, late night, and early morning visits to RCEA's offices outside his normal work week to deal with alarms, power outages, and computer backups. Therefore, be it proclaimed that the board of directors and staff of the Redwood Coast Energy Authority, collectively the RCEA family, hereby express our deepest gratitude to Dana Boudreau for his remarkable service and dedication. We extend our heartfelt congratulations and best wishes to Dana as he embarks on a well-deserved and joyful retirement.
You think after all these years, I've actually prepared something, but I think I need to speak. It is a sad moment, but there is some happiness in it too. I think nobody who's retired has ever told me there was anything bad about it, so I'm looking forward to that. But I'm still part of the community and the energy touches everything, so I'll still be lurking in the background. Not going away. Just a couple brief thoughts. When I started my career in 1977, I really liked the Japanese model of being able to work somewhere for a lifetime. And the reason for that is because sometimes it just really takes a long time to get things moving, to get something accomplished. And RCEA has really been able to achieve that. I encourage everybody to take a look at our vision statement and our mission statement. And it's time for an update, but there's still quite a few things in there that are valid, and you'd be surprised at what we have collectively accomplished. And I use the word collectively because it really took all of us, and it took all of us engaging our community to participate to make this happen. And I'm really proud and humble to be part of such a great organization. Thanks.
Yeah.
We have director comment? And we have director comment?
Anybody want to say anything?
Well, I do. Because I asked. Dana, because you have been part of this organization basically from the get-go, when new organizations start, there's always like a few people who do everything, kind of just because in a small organization, you have to wear a lot of hats. And so that's what I really see that you did. So, besides all the IT stuff, and just basically whatever came up, you were just gonna like, okay, I'll do that too. And that's just so appreciated. And small, fledgling organizations always need people like you. And so I think we were really lucky to have you in the beginning. So thank you.
Thanks again for your service. Appreciate it. All right, on to item 4, oral and written communications. This time is provided for people to address the board or submit written communication on matters not on the agenda. At the conclusion of all oral communications, the board may respond to statements. Any request that requires board action will be set by the board for a future agenda or referred to staff. Anything? Good. Right. We will move on to the consent calendar. All matters on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the board and are enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of any of these items. If discussion is required, that item is removed from the consent calendar and considered separately. At the end of the reading of the consent calendar, board members or members of the public can request that an item be removed for separate discussion. And I'm aware that item 5.7, there's been a request to pull that. Is there anything else someone wants to pull? Just going with that. Okay.
Sorry, Chair, but by pull, you mean move to for discussion? Correct?
Discussion, sorry.
Right.
Yeah. Can we get, do we want public comment? I mean, we just.
I think public comment is needed. Yeah.
Yes, okay. We need to approve Need a motion to approve the remaining items on the consent calendar.
I'll move approval of 5.1 through 5.9 minus 5.7.
I'll second that.
Give a motion and a second. Is that a roll call or is that?
No roll call needed. And just confirming, he does not need to read the entire consent calendar.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for that. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Yeah, abstentions? Right, motion carries. I'm not sure who's.
I can present. Yeah, thank you. This is Beth Burks, Executive Director. So this item was a resolution to adopt amended board operating guidelines. The subject of the public comments was related to the weighted voting. So those of you who are here might remember that staff presented an unchanged 2025 weighted vote, board vote distribution to the board in January. So each year we come back with looking at populations and say how the weighted vote's going to work. And so it was unchanged in January, but it did get pulled from consent. And we were directed to gather more information about why the weighted voting was there in the first place, when the Community Choice Energy Program was adopted, and why RCEA's non-city and county members are not allowed to vote on Community Choice Energy programs. So we talked through that and learned that basically the enabling legislation for community choice energy aggregators only allows for cities and counties to join those boards. So with that further discussion, we talked about, well, how do we make sure that everyone on our board, that includes tribal representatives and the water district, has some say in most RCEA matters. And what we were most concerned about was making sure that the full board was voting when we had items that were fundamentally connected to our overall strategy and goals and initiatives. And so we made a recommendation after reviewing that we would, and what was in the staff report today was that we would change the setting of overall CCA program objectives, determining power content targets, procurement strategies and procedures to items that would be voted on by the full board. And we were recommending that because we felt that even though these were CCA related items, they still had a fundamental connection to our overall strategy, our overall policies and initiatives. And so that's why we made the recommendation. The public comment we've received has indicated that they feel that this essentially subverts the will of the public by giving more power to the smaller agencies. This certainly wasn't our intent. We were actually, I think, trying to increase representation when we were making this call. So that is essentially, what they've requested and why the item was pulled. And I think there's 2 or 3 public comments in front of you that essentially get at that.
Thank you for that. Any questions?
Does this limit the end of it, the weighted voting? Does it eliminate the weighted voting?
No, the weighted voting stays intact for the CCA specific business. So when, for example, we did CCA specific business when we adopted the programs, the rebates that was supposed to be specifically funded through the CCA dollars, that was only a CCA board vote.
Are those ones that are in white on page?
Yes, yeah, those were,
55.
yeah, it's just the highlighted ones that we're recommending the change.
And yellow are the ones that are going to go over to the non.
Yeah, that would be a full board vote. That's the recommendation. The highlighted ones would move to a full board vote.
Right, that's all I have to ask.
Oh, Natalie.
So it seems like based on particularly the letter that was like the sort of coalition letter from 50 Humboldt, a variety of organizations, that it hinges on the idea that the population weighted votes would go to a single vote per jurisdiction, but that's not what we're talking about.
I think they're saying, the way I read it was that they were saying that by having a single vote per jurisdiction on these items gives more authority to smaller jurisdictions. They're having an equal vote to places that have a lot more population represented.
Okay,
I think they were favoring the weighted voting for more decisions because it felt like it was more representative of population.
I think they may have possibly not heard the conversation that we had before, or like maybe that's worthy of some additional outreach to these folks, because I think if they were part of that discussion, I mean, I'm not sure if we have folks online who are part of this coalition or planning to participate and weigh in on this, but yeah, I don't know if the conversation about like tribal involvement was and participation in voting was necessarily like if that information was clear. I suspect that we would have a different letter in front of us if that had been conversation that we'd had, but I'll say if this item gets continued, I'm certainly willing to do some outreach to folks to help share my thoughts on it.
Yeah, and I will say we've received these comments, some as late as today, so we haven't had a ton of time to do that. I mean, one small gesture today that didn't, reach somebody. So I think, I'm also happy to do that outreach and I had a similar thinking. But yeah, I think just given the time that we received until now, we haven't had a chance to rectify any of that.
And is this important to adopt today? Is there any reason that this needs to be adopted in a timely manner?
I think the local procurement item that was,
Yeah, travel policy.
which there's no upcoming, so yeah.
Yeah, but there is an item on today's agenda that would technically remove that local procurement discussion that we have. We put that as a full board item, and I think that would go back to CCA only business.
Yeah. I had a very brief contact with one of the folks who was a signatory on the letter that had like all those different organizations. And yeah, that was kind of like in the staff report, and maybe they had not been aware of our previous discussions in the last meeting. And he went, oh, okay. So I was like, all right, that was our bad. We didn't make that clear. So I don't know, I can't speak for everybody, but for at least that one group, I think that they now understand what the real purpose and, what our goals were in this change.
Yeah, I think it's what we asked for, and I'm ready to move forward on it today, but.
Any further comments? Right, got to anybody in the room, public comment? If so, anybody online? Okay, well, somebody wants to entertain a motion or motion to move to another meeting.
I do want to be sure I'm clear what we're talking about today. Which now because of reading this, I'm muddled. We're talking about the two tribal nations and the water district being able to vote on the three items highlighted, but we're not talking about changing the rest of the voting weighting. Is that correct? So we would need to reallocate, or what weight would those three new voters get?
A single vote. When the full board is voting, everyone gets a single vote.
Okay.
It would move those items from CCA business to non, right?
Where everyone has a single vote.
Non-weighted votes don't matter because it's not CCA business.
Exactly.
Not to put you on the spot, Michael, but I'm very curious what you think about this.
I mean, I agree that there seems to be a miscommunication with these organizations, whose opinions I think are important. I think that our overall intention was not in line with what they're suggesting here. And I guess I'm undecided as to whether or not we should move forward or take the time to discuss these items with them and vote on it next time. But I support the change, and I don't think that their arguments change my opinion.
And may I suggest, I think both options of either voting on it today or continuing it, we would be willing to do the outreach. So I mean, if you voted on it today, we could still do the outreach to explain the previous meeting and how we got here, or we could continue and do that ahead of.
One of the things that I kind of wish in a way is that, we're a small community and people can talk to us. There's a bunch of us here in that meeting last, and I would have loved for them to like talk to one of us and say, hey, this is my concern. Is this what you guys mean to happen? And that didn't happen. Instead, it's just like, I'm just gonna do a public comment and make it all official and all that. So, I mean, and that's obviously their right to do that. I do wish though that we had some conversation first before having to do all this. That's my comment.
I think this makes certain assumptions, well, one in particular about smaller communities, which here are also further described as being more conservative and less concerned about climate change. And to me, that seems highly presumptive, and that, those considerations would impact the votes of the directors here. So I suppose if there was to be some validity to this, there would need to be some further justification for implications such as those, which, seem to be pretty rash.
Yeah, and I will add, I've been on this board for 4 years, and I think there has only been one vote where the CCE quorum actually came into play, and having that sway what the vote was. And so, I mean, I usually, to your point, Michael, that, yeah, usually we are pretty united on a lot of these climate change issues, these procurement issues, as a board, as a community. So I would be, yeah, just to agree with that.
I would motion to move forward.
I would second.
Can I make one more comment about it? Just, I wasn't clear on whether we have folks waiting to make comment on this or participating remotely, but the point was for tribes to have a stronger voice in the things we're doing, for me at least. That's why I brought it up last time. I would say a little bit less concerned about the weighting, although the weighting, I think, rubs some people the wrong way. And I understand that. Water district is, and then you get to also have another, kind of a vote on more of the business. And I think, you and other representatives have been really involved. And so it makes sense, and you generate power. So I think there's, good reasons for everyone in this room to have a vote on as much as possible, but it really was intended to primarily ensure that we weren't excluding our tribal members from having a vote on things. So I hope that is something that the community who is responding to this hears loud and clear.
Also to reiterate, the items that are currently weighted votes remain weighted votes.
Yes.
And the items that are currently non-weighted votes just include those other members who are not currently included, which are single vote votes. Okay. So that's not really relevant.
Can I also point out that it's state law that has a narrower voting group for CCA matters. Now, it's RCEA that chose to have weighted voting on the CCA matters. But no matter what we did about the weighted vote component, we still have that state law on who can vote ultimately on the CCA related issues. And so the goal of the revision that's before you now was to try to expand the topics that the CCA is currently looking at to the larger governing board.
Yeah, like this doesn't fix the problem at hand, which is a legislative fix at the state level. And we would need to have different conversations with.
Exactly. It's not, it is, weighted voting is not really the issue we're talking about.
But at least we would be.
This step, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Frank.
The only part that I really have, you know, and maybe they're all related, but of the three items in yellow, 2 and 3 don't seem to be. Well, they do and they don't relate to the CCA items. Setting the overall CCA project objective, program objective is done by essentially a non or partially non-CCA members. I mean, it's kind of like, let's have an election and let's not have the citizens of California vote for California legislature, but we'll let the United States vote for California legislature and determine who those are going to be. It would be one way of that's my summing it up. It seems to make, and then even as you go a little farther and you talk about getting your power targets and your, I don't know about strategy and procedures, but it still seems like those are very much related to the CCA operation itself. And so you're allowing the other part of the entity to make the decisions for the CCA, but not really all of it. It doesn't seem consistent with itself in when I read it.
Yeah.
So that would have me, and I know originally I wasn't real big on the weighted, the way it was presented to us in the original format of the JPA, but it has been what it has, and it gives the people that are on the CCA that are actually the ones that are the participants of the power purchasing and selling and consumption as the ones that are making that decision. And so that's kind of the lines that I would continue to follow for whatever reason.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so like speaking from the entity who had not been able to vote on these CCA things. Well, one thing, just because I live in an unincorporated area anyway, then, whoever's the county representative, RCEA, represents me. So, that's how I get my personal, voice heard in this RCEA venue. The other way is, as we know, right, these topics are super tech dense, right? I mean, there's like a big learning curve on this stuff to really try to understand these decisions we make. To the extent that we all do that homework and put in that energy, that is really how you make a difference on this report, is to really understand the issues well enough so that you can talk about them to people. And so that is really, I have never, you guys always, laugh at me, especially God. Yeah, I did it like last month, where it's like, oh, I want to vote, like I'm all about voting. Oh, damn vote, and so, but I've never really felt like it was a super bummer that I couldn't get my voice heard in terms of a vote, because I've always been able to get my voice heard in this, doing this. And the other thing is that the annual budget, man, that is a thing. If you ever have a real problem with something going on, look at the budget. That's how you stop something, and you don't fund it. So that was kind of my other reason of why I never really felt too bad about not being able to vote.
And can part of including the power content targets was the fact that we were adjusting our targets in the last year because of budget decisions that affect greater than the CCA. They affect, personnel that are running programs that aren't directly involved with the CCA. And so there is that nexus of what we decide with our power content targets of how we operate as a greater JPA. And so to your point, if you want to make a decision, it's the budget, but part of that is, we start with what are our overarching organizational goals, and then it trickles down from there. So that was a little bit on the line of thinking with staff of why those made sense of moving to the full board because of the implications, the organization.
I mean, I would add implications to the region and adjacent regions served by RCEA, which includes a lot of tribal lands long before RCEA existed. And, the CCA's program objectives, power content targets, these do and will continue to, I think, increasingly have impact on the environment in this region, among other things. And for tribes to not have a direct vote on setting that content, I think is unjustifiably wrong. So for those reasons, I don't think that in my mind, there's any ambiguity as to whether or not these should be included. I would only say, should this whole list not be something to consider in future iterations of this same topic?
Raise the question of how much leeway do we have over, because this is the board operating guidelines that specify this. So is there a narrower definition of what has to be city and county voted upon only according to the CPUC, or is that up to each organization to determine what quote CCA business is?
The CPUC has not defined. The CPUC only defines what a community choice aggregator can be. And so it doesn't define who can vote on the CCA decisions. RCEA is, I believe, the only CCA that has this blended composition of a whole, raft of issues that are outside the CCA world and members that are not community choice aggregators. So this is uniquely RCEA's issue with no CPUC or state law.
Lucky us. Navigate this.
Well, yeah, and if I get into that, I will say, I think we're really a leader in this space. So even in the last week, I've had a call from another executive director or CEO of another CCA that was calling just to ask this: how did you get tribal nations involved on your board? How do you make it work given the CPUC regulations? So I think, this really blended process we have in the way we've navigated it. I think others are looking to us to figure out, does it work? And, how does it look? What could that be? We have a unique situation that we existed before we were a CCA. Most CCAs were formed to be just that. But I think it gives us this really great opportunity to show leadership in this space.
I mean, I guess that brings up, are these three identified as the sort of low hanging fruit that we could make this change with? And why not some of the other things? Why not setting customer rates, for example?
I personally, and this is something that could be debated at greater length, but I personally think that is one of the unique CCA, community choice aggregation functions, is the customer rates. That is what the inherent purpose of community choice aggregator is to be able to establish the electricity rates.
sorry, this is naive, but why are tribes now on the RCEA board but not part of the CCA?
State law.
So that's another topic on our agenda then? All right.
No, we
So it won't be,
talked about over
it should be.
beginning
Yeah.
of January, we started.
Right. Okay.
We have added items to our policy platform to support, expanding that definition and.
So the JPA law expanded in, was it the 1990s? I mean, the JPA law used to be exclusive to cities and counties, right? They could share their powers jointly and create an independent public agency. And I think it was in the 1990s or the early 2000s that law expanded to allow tribal nations to join with cities and counties and other entities as well, to share joint powers to create a unique and distinct type of public agency that is defined by whatever by whatever the agreement is on the shared powers. Separate from that, we have the state law that allows cities and counties to become community choice aggregators to aggregate their customer base for electricity purposes and to be able to regulate the rates and become load serving entities to those customers.
It does sound like there's a separate road we could go down of working with one of our legislators to bring a legislative fix to this, since we're we're unique and this only affects us in the CCA world, but it could be something that gets changed at the state level based on information that we provide about how it's impacting energy in areas where there's a lot of tribal nations.
Right, and as Beth said, the policy platform was changed to provide staff the ability to begin to weigh in on those issues.
I mean, for what it's worth, at the state level, I've also spoken recently within the last couple of weeks to a CPUC commissioner who did say as much that the CPUC also is very interested in what RCEA has done in involving tribes and would like to have that further discussion about what they can do to help facilitate that in other parts of the state. And so, this just takes the leadership position that RCEA has established and makes it more formal.
Is this, I don't know, this is maybe a rhetorical, but I don't. Where does the reservations get, when they buy power, does it come from PG&E? Or do you, I mean, I understand the microgrid setup which I think is one of the more outstanding things, but without the microgrid, where do the reservations get their power? Is that from PG&E?
Depends on their location, yeah. Yurok is partially outside of PG&E service area and Pacific Power and Light.
Be part of like Crescent City or whatever.
Yeah.
Whoever that.
The rest of it, yes. And so if you're a Humboldt County based tribe, then yeah. PG.
And we cover tribal areas, so they are our customers unless.
I mean, so they're automatically.
Yes, unless
they're automatically included in, just like when they made everybody, when they came out with RCEA, everybody was suddenly a member. Were the tribes automatically members, and then they had the option to opt out and go to RCEA.
It's the individuals residing, it's the individual customers as opposed to the tribal nation, right? So it's the individual customers on the tribal nation.
Can opt out.
Well, and this is like the nuance that we talked about before, is that like probably, yes, there are your customers that are buying power from PG&E, but they also probably live in an unincorporated county, area also. And so like that overlapping nature of that.
So they're considered part of the unincorporated.
Well, it doesn't take a different,
What I said,
or this is the only tribal.
but yeah, we're on the same page.
We're good.
I was just trying to understand what Nancy was saying. Go ahead. Yep.
Is the URAC is the Bear River? Are they the two that are on in RCEA? Are they able to, or I guess it's Blue Lake, there's no other tribes in the state that are on CCAs, is that correct?
You mean on the governing boards?
Well, yeah, I guess it would be governing boards, not ones that are members, individual members, but one that are on boards and any other CCAs. We're the only CCA that has tribal nations.
Yeah, and they're not technically on the CCA board.
They're not on the
Yeah,
CCA.
but because other CCAs are only really formed to be a CCA. We're the unique exception that we existed before we took on the CCA as a program. So we have a different setup, but yes, we're the only one that has this setup.
We're also a
We're setting a precedence where we're doing something that nobody else is doing is what we're essentially doing.
And we have been since our formation, since the CCA came about in 2017.
I'll say that again.
We have been unique in this case since the formation of the CCA. We have been unique among all of them, that we were an organization that existed prior to forming for the specific purpose of being a CCA. So all those years of our CEA existing as a joint powers agency, no other CCA has that history.
I don't know if again, it still seems like we're premature in where we're going, I guess, unless we're trying to set a precedent.
I think we are trying to set a precedent.
Yeah.
That's what this.
We are trying to be.
Already,
Yeah.
I would have some other bad comparisons that I don't want to make in this. I'm not trying to be derogatory. I think having the tribe, the nations as part of this, because it's who we are in this county, that's kind of like, but I don't know. Maybe it's a moot point because I'd probably be a minority in this vote anyway, so maybe a moot point. And let's drag it out all day or just get it over with. Vote. Yeah, that's where it lies.
Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second.
I do have another comment. I mean, I think that the issue at hand is about whether we want to give everyone an equal voice in determining what the goals of our overarching programs are and what we all equally value as far as how we will procure power. And I can see that is where some community members are worried about a change. But I think the reason that I pulled the item about the weighting and the CCA voting however many months ago that was to have this exact conversation that we're having today. So I don't think any of it is necessarily premature, even if we don't accomplish all the goals in one meeting or in one kind of decision together today. It's still moving us closer to everybody having a part in that decision-making, even if there are some things that we're still fleshing out about the CCA piece, which is important to me also. But anyway, I'm ready to vote. I don't think any of it is necessarily premature because we're moving towards more one member, one vote on the things that are kind of setting our goals and vision.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Thank you. It's good discussion. Are we on to community choice energy business? Items under this section of the agenda relate to CCE specific business matters that fall under RCEA's CCE voting provisions, with only CCE participating jurisdictions voting on these matters. with weighted voting as established in the RCEA Joint Powers Agreement. Item 7, I need to read the business consent calendar. Can't just go to 7.1.
I think you're good. Yeah, I think
Right
it's-
here, 7. And we have under the consent calendar 7.1, approve addendum 2025A to the RCEA Energy Risk Management Policy, making Deputy Executive Director a voting member of the Risk Management Team effective July 1st, 2025, replacing the role currently filled by the Director of Infrastructure Planning and Operations. Does anybody want to hold or discuss this item? No? Take it out to the public? Anybody online? No? Okay, anybody in the room?
Move for adoption of 7.1.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We have to do roll call, don't we? No? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. And that's the end of community choice energy business. We're going to move on to item 10, old business, 10.1, public hearing on RCEA staff vacancy report. HR Manager Christy Sino.
That's too small. Hello, thank you for having me. I'm Christy Sino, the HR manager here at RCEA. And I'm here to give you the status of our staff vacancies for Assembly Bill 2561. And for those board members that are on other governing bodies, this is going to be something very similar to what you've heard before. But for those not on governing bodies, AB 2561 requires that a public agency present the status of their vacancies in a public hearing before the board approves the budget for the upcoming year. RCEA has 39 board-approved full-time positions, and of those positions, currently 3 of them are vacant. We have 1 coordinator in finance and business planning, a specialist in administration, and a technician in and then a technician in DSM specifically to the NREN program. The reason for those vacancies, the large reason for those vacancies is because they were made vacant with your actions mid-year budget. So they are relatively new positions, 2 were unfrozen and 1 was reallocated. I am expecting that NREN position recruitment to begin here over the summer as our NREN programming ramps up. And for the other 2 positions, we're currently looking at what positions and opportunities we have available so that when we bring somebody on, we actually have full-time work for them. So it's to be determined, but we are looking right now at capacity and where we can trade some of those opportunities. So there are things that we have to let you know for the statute. Is that we prioritize local candidates whenever possible. So you will often find our vacancies are posted locally on newspapers, Craigslist, and our website and social media. And for those hard to fill or highly specialized, we will go out to CEA and other specialized boards we can source some talent from out of the area. One thing that is a hindrance to our recruitment efforts are our current job descriptions. There are very few of them, and they are very vague and often hard to fit into the position we're looking for. So we're very excited going through the class compensation study with Gallagher Consulting and hoping to fix that hole and make our recruitments a little bit more easier going forward, as well as clearing up some of the duties for our current staff members. The final part of the government code under this statute does apply more to those with bargaining units. And as we do not currently have any unionized employees, I won't talk about that part with you. I'm happy to answer questions as well if you have any.
Thank you. We have any questions? All right. Have any public comment? No one's online. All right, and no one in the room. Needed to take motion.
It was a public hearing, and I don't believe there's.
I just received court.
It was the public hearing.
I will we'll close the public hearing. Thank you, Chrissy. And we'll move on to 10.2 cost of living salary adjustment. Deputy Director Eileen.
Yes, hi, thank you. So we discussed this a little bit at the last meeting, so we're bringing a cost of living adjustment back to the board for approval today. RCA has a board adopted employee compensation policy. And in that policy, it states that we will conduct an internal salary survey every 2 years. The last time we conducted this survey was in 2023. We had received direction from the board that they would like us to conduct a third-party full classification and compensation study. And that study would include all 39 of our positions, all of our current staff and classifications, including the executive director position. We went into contract with Gallagher Consulting earlier this year, and they are currently in the process of doing that study. We did provide them our 10 labor market agencies that we have in our board approved policy, and they're going to evaluate our existing salaries with those agencies. And then they're also going to make recommendations for either replacing or adding new agencies to our comparisons. We're expecting our final reports from Gallagher Consulting in September of this year. Based on basically they're doing the work we would have done internally, we've paused doing the internal biannual salary survey. We are coming to the board for formal action of pausing that survey this year, depending on the results that we receive from Gallagher. We plan on presenting the results and recommendations to the full board, and that may even include adjustments to our existing salary compensation policy. But we're recommending that we hold off on any decisions based on those recommendations till the mid-year budget review, so that the board can make a full decision with the full budget picture in mind at the time of that decision. So in recognition that RCA salaries have not increased since 2023 and a proposed pause in the salary adjustments to February 2026, staff is recommending a cost of living increase, and that would be included in the recommendations and results that Gallagher will present to the board later this year. So they'll take into account the increase if the board approves an increase today into those results. So what we did is we looked at the Consumer Price Index Western Region and the Social Security Administration's published COLA for 2024 and 2025. The CPI Western Region came out at 5.1%, and the Social Security Administration increase was 5.6 the 2 years. Since that time, Cal Poly Humboldt has published a Humboldt CPI, which was great timing. Looking at local indices of inflation just for Humboldt County. I will say, you know, they published how many comparisons that they are using versus, you know, the all-state CPI. It's a much smaller data set. But theirs came up with 8.9% increase for Humboldt County for the 2 years, much higher than the state increases. So staff is proposing a 6% COLA increase. This amount in salary and fringe is roughly $300,000 for the year. And it is included in the budget that's being presented after this item. Lastly, in April 2024, the board made the decision to separate out the executive director salary from staff salary. In that decision, it was decided that they would have the latitude to extend any approved increases or adjust the ED's salary outside of the survey whenever it's deemed necessary. As I mentioned before, we did include the executive director classification in the third-party class and comp analysis, and those results will be presented to the board. At this time, the executive director is not recommending the board extend the COLA to that classification at this time. The reason for that is the ED salary has been adjusted more recently than the full staff adjustment in 2023. And then also just taking into account being a new hire and recently negotiating a salary. The executive director is recommending any salary review be done with the performance evaluation, which would occur starting in January 2026. The timing of that is good because we will have the third-party class and comp results in hand for the board to make any decisions at that time. And so with that, I'll take any questions.
Right, thank you. Any questions? No? All right. I don't think we still have any public participating online and none in the room. Can I get a motion?
is the recommendation of staff is to do the COLA. Is that correct? I make a motion that we accept that 6% COLA increase to become effective July 1st, 2025.
In the first part too,
So, yeah,
about the internal buy-in
And what?
and number one as well.
it's move staff.
And number one.
Yeah.
Yes, and to do the internal biannual salary study.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and second. Just a regular old vote, no roll call. I'll never get that right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No abstentions, all right.
I was wondering.
Forever. So, all right, on to item 10.3, RCEA fiscal year 2025-26 budget.
I'll give this one. Yeah, thanks. So next slide, please. So just the budget in your packet, we are recommending approval of the same draft budget that was reviewed last month. So last month, when your board saw it, it was after review of the finance subcommittee. Last month, the staff addressed questions, but was not directed to make any changes. So specifically, the budget worksheets you have in your packet are identical to the ones reviewed by the board last month. In addition to that, we prepared a budget narrative. This is a new format for us. We thought it was just a different way to make sure that sort of the information that's sort of provided in that first staff report, which is a little more detailed about what we're aiming to accomplish with the year's budget and how our departments work. So we put together that narrative. The budget numbers in there are packaged slightly differently, but they are all consistent with the budget worksheets that you've seen before. I will say this is a new endeavor for us to try to put this document together. So today or otherwise, please feel free to give us some feedback if you feel like it's a valuable resource. We were hoping that it just lends a little sort of like if somebody's wondering, what are we trying to do with this budget? Some words to that versus just the spreadsheets. So next slide, please. So I'm going to go through just some really high level reminders of what we talked about last time, and then we'll be happy to take questions. But since we dove deep last time, I'm not going to redo that. We also have a very jam-packed meeting today. Again, the annual goals we're working for, we have efficient and effective internal operations. And with that, we have included, our financial position as being one of those efforts. We want to excel in our program delivery, especially as we launch the NREN program, which has been a long time coming. And then a big focus on community engagement and planning for the future. So we know that we have a strategic plan update coming up and other documents that we want to make sure we're well positioned with our community to address. Next slide, please. So overall, we're looking at revenue of 83.2 million. After expenses, we're hoping to add 5 million to our reserves this year. And generally, revenue, by and large, comes from electricity sales. We also have grants and contracts, and primarily the biggest portion of that is the NREN program. Our expenses also led with wholesale power supply being our largest expense. The other ones I'll call out, of course, personnel follows that. And then, we are budgeting more than we have in the past for communications and outreach, really wanting to make sure we're, being out there in the community. And then the professional and program services, that again is NREN, and a lot of that is pass-through funds. Next slide, please. So I did want to spend just a little bit reminding on debt service and cash reserves. We don't have a ton of debt service, but we are really focused on this reserve policy. So again, we're looking at hopefully being able to put 5 million into reserves. We have a reserve policy that that our goal is 100 days, 180 days cash on hand maintained over the course of a year. So right now that would amount to about 33.1 million. Right now we have 23.4, or as of May 9th, we had 23.4 of unrestricted cash. So we are getting there, and the 5 million will be a big help in getting closer to that goal. And there's lots of other benefits that come from achieving our financial reserve policy. So that's really all I wanted to highlight for the budget, and happy to take any questions. Again, it's exactly what we saw last month.
Right, thank you. Any questions? All right. No public comment today. Can I get a motion? Anyone?
Move to adopt the proposed 25-26 budget.
Second.
I do want to note that the narrative description, especially about like how many people are in the department and the quick blurbs about what they do, and that was very handy, because I often you'd think that I knew what everybody did, but I don't necessarily. So it's
Well, I would say you may have been the inspiration a little bit for really. Only because I think those questions do come up, and I think it's also very handy to have this as a document, and there's other reasons, but I do think it's reasonable to ask, how do we work, and hopefully we're getting closer to being able to explain.
love it.
Right. We have a motion and second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Abstentions? Nope. All right, motion passes. Thank you. We'll move on to item 11, new business, and 11.1. We call it COD demo?
Demo. We've covered that you can say it any way you like. The demo, it's short for the California demonstration. So I launched into my staff report. Yeah, and we'll have some support on this from outside speakers. We'll be promoting to panelists pretty quick here. But the Cademo project is a proposed floating offshore wind demonstration project located off the Central Coast near the Vandenberg Space Force Base. This is near Lompoc, California. It is in state waters. They have an interconnection available, which is making it, potentially the most viable offshore wind project to be able to move forward in California. We have, and I will say we have Michael Jacobson from the Cademo team. He is here to give a presentation really diving into the details of the project. So I'm going to focus my remarks on kind of how we got here to the RCEA decision point, and then I'll have him present, and then we'll kind of close it up with some remarks before we open it up to board questions. So RCEA has been involved with this project through our California Community Power involvement, which is a joint powers agency that we are a member of. And the reason it's us along with, I think, 8 other CCAs are a member of this joint powers agency. And really this was formed for the purpose of combining our buying power to explore new procurement and and how we can develop or take part in cost-effective clean energy. So through that joint effort, being part of that joint powers agency, they were looking at a plan to consider partnering with a demonstration project for floating offshore wind to see if it could spur offshore wind development in California. And that's how CC Power got into a memorandum of understanding with the Cademo project as really the only demonstration project being proposed in California. And there has been robust collaboration to kind of get it to the point it is now, which you'll hear more from Michael about kind of where we're at with the project. RCEA has been a big participant in that collaboration. And a lot of that comes from just our longstanding interest and leadership in the offshore wind space. And so I think staff, long before I arrived, has been very supportive of seeing this project move forward. And certainly, after I got here, I think, we've been tracking it very closely and figuring out how to, support this idea moving forward. At this point, based on a number of factors, the Catamo project, it needs interconnection funding to continue. There is a deposit that needs to be posted with PG&E on July 24th. At this point, they're looking for ways to fund that interconnection. So given our longstanding interest and leadership in offshore winds, I wanted to bring this decision before the board to see if we would be interested in lending these funds. The total amount is $1,110,500. This would be what we're looking at, what we're asking for would be the formation of an ad hoc committee that could review loan terms. This interconnection deposit does need to be paid by July 24th. So we're on a tight timeline. So the idea would be the ad hoc committee would be empowered to, work with our council, work with outside counsel, and really look over these loan terms. Or they could also be escrowed. There's a few different vehicles that we could use to post this deposit. I will say the main reason I am bringing this to the board is that there is a very low risk to these funds. They are a deposit that is refundable if the project doesn't move forward. So we would have, as it appears now, we'll be making sure we feel really confident about this moving forward. But it would be something we could place in escrow, potentially earn interest on. And if the project didn't move forward, those funds would be refunded to us. If the project is able to be moved forward, those funds would be replaced with project funds from another source. So this would be a very short-term loan that would, as all indicators show right now, be refundable, and we'd be confirming that before we executed loan terms. And it would, again, be done by December when this second interconnection fee is due. And I would not be recommending us getting involved in the second fee. So really, this is our opportunity, if we want it, or if your board would like to essentially buy this project some more time, to keep their interconnection position live and see if they have, can in the next 6 months can raise the funds to keep the project going. So that's kind of my overview. And then I would like to turn it over to Michael Jacobson from the Catamo team to, just kind of dive deeper, help share, more information about the project. Oh, and I will also say we have Lee Gerritsen here. He's from CC Power, so he can speak to anything related to sort of how we got to this point through their involvement.
All right. Can you hear me all right?
Good.
All right. So first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Michael Jacobson. I am the founder and chairman of CERECO. And CERECO is the owner of the Catamo project. And we've had this since the very beginning. And I just want to say thank you to the leadership of RCEA and the board for allowing us this time today to present about the project. So I hope I can give an update on the project. So I will go right to it. Next slide, please. So the Catamo project is one of our projects, and we're a company that works on the front line. We work on early stage projects, sort of introducing into new markets, new technology, or new environments and whatnot. CERECO was founded in 2001, and our basis is in between California, Palm Springs here, and in Boudreau in Scotland. So on two different places, but working on floating offshore wind as our primary interest. We've been involved, so myself, I've been involved since the very first offshore wind turbine back in 1989, 1990. And so this development of offshore wind is something that is very known to us. And that's why we're also pushing to do it in the very right way. And so having worked with a number of companies in close joint ventures from Électricité de France to Shell to Scottish Government and others, we've sort of come to learn the importance of how to go about it and how to build a project, not maybe so much for the environment, but with the environment you're in. So just looking at on the right side of this slide, this is what we have working on at the moment. This is, first of all, we have the California project started in 2018. It's a 60 megawatt project. I'll come back to that. a little bit further. In the UK, we also have two projects. It was an award by the UK government where we are looking to build 2 times a 100 megawatt. Also, as we are technology agnostic, 2 projects in the front line that will introduce new technology and industry into that market. So we had this last block here is sort of an oddball, and that's to build one of the world's largest wind turbines, but that's on a fixed bottom side. And that's sort of what the purpose of getting the foot in the door with the world's largest technology, which will come eventually. But that's sort of a little bit of who we are as a company. Next slide. I want to take a minute just to talk about why are we doing pilot projects. And I just listed a list here on the right-hand side about projects and what examples of how this have come to play a very vital role in the past. I won't go into the details of them, but I have a bolded one further down below, and that's the Block Island project on the East Coast. And Catamo is really the Block Island project of the West Coast. And when we look at introduction of offshore wind or building offshore wind, and we know that the big developers have big, bold goals and targets, but it's very important how we introduce it, how we build this, because there's a balance between bringing it in sensibly and make it introduce it to the environment that you're in, rather than putting 200 turbines and gigawatts up there and big plans and maybe scaring people. And this is very important. So what you see here, we're working very closely to de-risk this market. And I think most of all is when we're looking at the integration, the social integration, and we have communities around us, and everybody's fearful for visual view shed, and how will this impact my environment? Will the price of power be more expensive? And how will it work? All that kind of stuff. And that's really what this project is about, is to sort of demystify things and make us understand this much better. So the cost of energy reduction for the bigger project is probably the biggest impact, because when we're looking at from the past, a project like this would probably help us reduce cost in up to an amount of possibly 9 billion from the bigger projects, where the learnings from the first projects really cuts down the cost of energy. So I think that's an emphasis that we want to make here, is that, which is a value of this project. Next slide. So Catamo is located 2.5 or 2.8 miles off of the Vandenberg Space Force Base coastline. And this is really unique. We have 41 miles of military land, which means that there's no view shed. We have basically 2 beaches that would see the turbines. Otherwise, it's just rocket launch pads and military grounds. And that's why the area is so suitable for offshore wind. The fact is that this project is now being in state waters. We're probably the only project that can move forward with permitting in the United States. And that's obviously why it becomes more of interest to everybody to pursue. And I think we're obviously keen to progress with that. If the project would go forward now and we could execute it, we would see basically going to the waters 2030, possibly 2031. But that's still over 5 years ahead of the big projects, and so it allows us to basically progress and develop information and mitigation measures and understand the environment. And we shouldn't forget that we've never put an offshore wind turbines in Pacific waters. So all the species and fauna and mammals is really important for us to document. So what you see is there's 4 turbines, basically the latest, the largest wind turbine class, 15 to 18 megawatts. But 15 megawatts is what we're targeting. 60 megawatts, for which we have an interconnection with PG&E, also subject of this meeting, obviously. And the annual production would be somewhere around 200 gigawatt hours. So something like the generation or consumption of Santa Barbara as a city. So that's a little bit about the project. I'll talk a little bit more about the next step, what is happening now, but this is as it was prior to the executive orders that have come. So let's go to the next slide. So when we talk about working with the environment around us, means that we involve the people around us. So we are located in the ancestral waters of the Santa Ynez Chumash tribe. So we engaged very early with them, and we were able to sign a tribal benefit agreement with them in 2023. and this is sort of interesting that this is the only and the first tribal benefit agreement in the nation. But there was a creative collaboration where this is laying the foundation for the first tribal oceanographic institute, where the tribe will be custodians of environmental information, will be able to engage in co-management and evolve in that space in modern times. That's among other things of that agreement. And our collaboration with Chumash, it continues. We have a good relation. We're looking at things ahead. The next thing on the plan is what we are exploring right now is a 2-year tribal apprenticeship program and a tribal information exchange platform that we're working and we're pursuing a grant with California Workforce Development Board. This is also unique of its kind, and we're working very closely together with the labor unions on that, or state building trades. Next slide. And talking about the labor unions and state building trades, and this is very important when we engage also, is that we have the labor with us, that we have an understanding of how we build this project, how we can construct it. And we did that. We concluded a project labor agreement with the labor unions. And we worked very closely with, we built a high road training partnership on the West Coast, on the Central Coast, where we then delivered a report about that in 2023. And it was quite an interesting process. But the labor is actually one of our greatest supporters in our process. So we're obviously keen to progress and work on creating jobs as much as we're creating a new generation platform. So that's sort of a balance that we're working on, obviously, which is sometimes tricky. Next slide, please. So we've also signed the agreement with the Department of Defense. That means a mitigation agreement, and that means that the military has no objection to the site locations. And that's obviously gone through the whole process of with all the bases and sorting out what are the radar signals and this and that. So that is behind us. We also have started to do baseline studies, but the big campaign of studies will start spring and summer 2026. So it is ahead of us then as we go forward. Next slide. Then we have the interconnection agreement. That was important. We got into cluster 14, which means that our cost surrounding the interconnection is quite beneficial. And obviously that topic for the subject of for discussion today. But yes, we have a really good relationship and have PG&E has really worked closely with us to accommodate for everything. Next slide. Stop there. So the one thing here that obviously have come into play is the executive orders, and this is the last slide I want to emphasize. So what do we do? The original cable route was on military land. That is all NEPA process permitting, which obviously would be affected by the executive orders. So we do have a mapped out route, and we're exploring that with the state. So instead of going south and going on military land, we could potentially come across and go directly into SURF. And that's something we're working with the state on to see that we can identify how that would work. But that would allow State Lands Commission to undertake the CEQA process completely, and there would be no NEPA in that part of the permitting process. The only NEPA relationship we would have would be with NOAA, because we are a part of, or we're right inside of the Chumash National Marine Sanctuary, or Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. But there again, we have Chumash that really wants this project. And also important here that although that this is a NEPA process, the NOAA has identified a pathway for how to deal with our permitting in their documentation. So in their EIS and in their documents for the sanctuary, they have identified a pathway, and that we have a really good relationship with NOAA at this point. So this is sort of the outlook of the project, and this is where we are. So I will stop right there, and maybe we can take the next slide just to talk about proportionality. Just wanted to show you this and how, although we are looking at building the foundations in the area of San Francisco, but there you can understand why we don't put the turbine on top, because that's the kind of size we're talking about. So thank you so much, and I'm here for any questions.
Good question. Thank you. Do we have any questions? Yeah, Mike.
only non-voting person here. I was here when this whole kickoff started. I think Beth was here also, I think, I don't remember for sure. And maybe some other people, but I was here when they did the kickoff, getting the thing started here, and then it just kind of flatlined. But looking at what they want to do there for the demonstration project, from a Humboldt connection, I'd like to see Humboldt workforce development people involved and maybe an apprentice or two that can work on that, so that when something does start here, it's not a completely new thing and there are people that have experience in it. And, you know, if we're going to loan them 100 or $1.1 million, you know, what else are we going to get out of it that we can bring back into Humboldt? And the intertie, that would be an awesome thing because we don't have anything similar at all here. It just help build that thing and make it work and generate electricity. I mean, if it's enough to power Santa Barbara for a year. So.
Yes,
That's just my thought.
I can comment on that because I think what you're saying here is absolutely vital. That's why we're doing this project. So although we have identified that the only port that could allow us to put these big foundations together over and take them over the port and the dock side is in Pier 96 in San Francisco. But that's why we have the labor union with us. So they will be a part of this. And we want to make sure that we make this a platform to all the learnings that we can take forward. And that would feed directly into the development of the port, insights of the fabrication. But then, of course, there's different fabrications here. They can be concrete, it can be steel, and they're vastly different. And I think from what we can tell today, that the cost elements of concrete looks a lot more favorable in our environment and also doable to build locally than complex steel structures. So that's just a hint from that technology agnostic approach. But clearly that needs to feed into both what you would do up in Humboldt and other places. So again, this is sort of a milk cow where we want to, you know, spread that know-how around as much as we can.
Looking at it from the point of building and assembling and all, if it does, when it does move into Humboldt, we would get benefit from having people with experience. And we have a community benefits organization already started here. So maybe that factors into that a little bit. If, as I said, if we're putting our money on the table for the development, I would hope that we could get our people involved in, because the base and all, that's one thing, but erecting and building the unit with the generator and the blades and the intertie and how that factors in, that's something that Humboldt people and workforce could be involved in.
Yeah. And that is indeed the plan. So once we would start production of this, or say the actual working port, I would clearly envision that it would be we would have staff from the Humboldt area working on it and being involved to make sure that all that know-how is captured. So at least from our standpoint, that is not even a question. It is an automatic process, I think, that we expect.
Just to say, one of the things we were hoping to get out of this discussion with the board is just what Mayor Johnson is mentioning. So, you know, the recommendation to have, you know, make sure it's refundable, have it be short duration, and anything else the board, you know, wants to provide direction on. I think these kinds of things are exactly what we would want to have direction for the ad hoc to, you know, look towards negotiations. What could a potential CBA look like that we could put as part of this agreement to see workforces or some kind of support we could get for our port development out of this, you know, to be determined through those discussions. But I think just along this line of thinking is exactly, you know, kind of the idea flowing that we need to be able to give direction to an ad hoc to make sure, we're accomplishing what we're hoping to.
Excellent. Elise, would you?
Well, I was just gonna ask if we could hear a little bit more about the interconnection. Is this an interconnection that's already existing? Are we building it from the ground up? Is it permitted but not built? What are we looking at there?
So the interconnection is, we would connect to the 115 kV PG&E distribution line, actually, not the transmission line at 115 kV. That's a line that goes all the way out to the surf on the beach, where there's a substation that feeds the oil and gas platform Irene, which is just a little bit due west of our turbines. And so this area is fed by a single line coming in, which means that even the base is subject to blackouts. So the whole region here is a problematic region for PG&E and for the people living there. That includes the disadvantaged communities and the Chumash tribe in their area. They're all based on or have this power. So the substation and the build, the way that it could be envisioned now would be we could avoid a lot of Gentile lines onshore. And this is what we're exploring. And this would be permitted as a part of the permit under the CEQA process with the State Lands Commission.
A single, not a three-phase line, a single line coming in.
Yeah, no, it's 115 three-phase with grounds and then zero coming in. But we would deliver power from the project at 70 kV. That would 6970 kV that will come ashore, and there we would have a transformer station that would transform up to 115, and then we would deliver to the PG&E network. That makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Michael, do you have a question?
I do. I don't know everything there is to know about the co-management agreement that NOAA had established with the Chumash tribes, I think maybe specifically with Santa Ynez. I saw in your slides that development within the marine sanctuary area would be regulated by NEPA, which I've had firsthand experience with, seeing the limitations of tribal involvement. And in my opinion, co-management, explicit co-management, as recognized by the federal government in federal projects, the state and state projects and others who are regulating these projects, is the only way for this to be done equitably and for it to even proceed at all. Given that NEPA is what you've cited as the remaining process in place for development within the marine sanctuary area, are there secondary steps you've taken in your CBA or in through other agreements with the coastal Chumash tribes or with Santa Ynez to allow for their veto authority or other powers when it comes to the potential development of the project based on development drawings or proposals that you might submit to them moving forward?
So first, the community benefit agreement is something that we have signed between the project and the Chumash, Santa Ynez Chumash, and it's because we're in their ancestral waters. So we're not in the northern tribes, they say ancestral waters. So we're working together with the Santa Ynez Chumash. So we have in that agreement, although it's in the sanctuary, the tribe, as they view it, is that this is a way for them to further their understanding, know-how, custodianship of environment, whatnot, which led to the suggestion or their proposal of an oceanographic institute, where they would then hire, with our help and workforce development, with California Workforce Development Board, to develop expert, that they will have their own expert working on that. The NOAA relationship and the tribe is obviously the relationship that they have of the sanctuary, where the Santa Ynez Chumash tribe is obviously a part of the co-management of the sanctuary, or together with NOAA. So it's three parties. It's NOAA, it's Chumash, Santini's Chumash and Chumash, and there is state. That the format for that is not set yet, but definitely they will be a part of that. So for us to build a project in the area, it is fundamentally important that we have a route of how we would do that. In the one situation, we would work with them on the identified pathway that we have established, or that NOAA has established. So they have explicitly mentioned CADMO and how they would deal with that. In the worst case, the timeline for building in 2030, 2031, we could wait out that permit to be following this White House or this White House or administration. Of course, if there is a continuation of that, then and there would be subjectivity in how they would like to approve or not approve, then obviously that's going to be a tough one. But at least we have two routes of how we can approach that, still within the timeline that we are aiming for. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
I think that was very helpful. I guess I have a follow-up, or maybe a more direct way of asking is, well, you probably can't answer, and especially if this is something that would be included in any agreements you have directly with Santa Ynez, but have you agreed to some authorities of Santa Ynez to determine whether or not this project can move forward in a formal way?
I think they have that automatically, being that they are the beneficiary of the sanctuary. So I think that is, how it has been viewed. And I think from the very beginning, it has never been a discussion of, or let's say, a reason for why we would, or why they would want to cancel the project. When we build these projects, they're so small that even 4 turbines, it's not supposed to change any habitat. It's not to change anything dramatically in an environment. And that's why we build so few turbines, that one would say, oh, it has too much impact. It's going to change a species or something else. So no, it has not been a discussion on that, where I think that they would use their powers within the sanctuary if they would like to stop it. And I think, to be quite honest, if the Chumash tribe would say no, I don't think we could build it anyway. I think the State Lands Commission would not approve it.
But nothing that you have with them formally that allows for that?
No, there's nothing formally in the agreement. There's different agreements of studies and them naming the project and all kinds of things in that agreement, but not that it's sort of an explicit veto.
All right, thanks.
Any more questions? I do have one, Michael, about the environmental community, and how are they feeling about this project?
So at the very beginning, it was very interesting, and they were we were engaging with them quite closely. It's always been, so the feedback from the community is obviously that we need to understand what species are doing and whatnot, and that's what we try to listen to. So obviously this would be sort of the platform where we would look at all the species. This would be available for all the different all and any environmental groups to take part of and be part of sort of the studies and whatnot, to understand what this is about. We have not had any I should say, direct great oppositions. There have been concerns and whatnot, and they have been addressed through sort of Q&A. And so at this point, I don't think we have seen any huge red flags, where in fact we have done a study where we looked at all the species that have been addressed by all and any of the environmental groups, and for the various protection areas in the areas of Morro Bay, what species are present there and that have been addressed. And we have over 98% of them present at the CADMO location, which means that we will be able at least to look at them in the surroundings of wind turbines and understand more closely how they engage. I think that is a huge value that we can build on. Obviously, species can do different things in different locations, but at least we have access to them and see how they respond to offshore wind turbines. which I think is very important before we build gigawatts of them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just think of it from our perspective here, like you're going to kind of set stage of how we proceed, you know, by looking at the effects on marine species. So I'm really curious to see how this all plays out.
Yeah, and I think that is, you know, when we're looking at, so in Europe, when we have looked at, say, mammals or dolphins and whatnot along the UK coast, the general behavior, and that is also in migrating birds and whatnot, has been really consistent throughout, where consistent through Europe. And obviously we have different species in different places. And I do think that there will be values here that we can bring with us also for the environmental community or the environmental situation you have up north, although it's slightly different. But you will definitely have a lot of the migrating species that goes along the coast that we will see through the project that would directly be providing values to your proposition or understanding for that proposition.
Thank you. Any questions for our guests? No? Well, thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Do we have any further discussion?
Is there one more slide for the action?
Yeah.
Revised action.
It continues on the next one.
Oh, it's just a lot of action.
Thank you. Actually have one clarification. The marine sanctuary has like a carve out for this area, right? The proposed Chumash Marine National Sanctuary.
I think it was just outside, wasn't it? That map.
There's the Vandenberg one that already existed, but then there's a proposed one. And I saw it in one of your Q&As online, but did you hear that question? Okay.
Yeah. No. So we are spot in it. The marine sanctuary is over 6,000 square miles. So the sanctuary is huge, and it goes from the south of us, you know, Channel Islands and all the way up north. So we are in a small spot, very close to the coast in comparison to the overall sanctuary. So yes, we're spot in it. And there's not a carve out, but how that would work is that the NOAA issues an operational license, and it allows then the project to operate within that area under a license. That's how it will be administrated.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just add one thing, which is somewhat, well, it's very much related, but not necessarily the business of Sierco, which is that the marine sanctuary, as I understand it, was initially proposed to extend all the way north past Morro Bay and connect to the Monterey sanctuary. And that there has since been decisions made that would carve off a massive portion of the sanctuary to allow for the larger federal developments to happen within the area that would have otherwise been sanctuary area. And so what that means for this project, I'm not sure, but I do know that, in my opinion, the smaller development obviously could be useful in that it would, as RCEA initially proposed here, provide an opportunity to see at a much smaller scale just what the impact might be, because I don't think anyone online or here has any idea, honestly. I mean, we have, well, maybe we have some idea, but we don't know for sure. So.
All right.
No, and I think this is absolutely true. We have coming out with a project like this and to operate it and to bring all this information is absolutely crucial. What they did, what NOAA did, and this is a little bit unfortunate because when we've had a situation where state permitting, they have been very cautious and careful to follow, not to favorize the project because they need to be independent and neutral. But what happened in the communication is that NOAA misunderstood the project because we are following a CEQA permitting process. That means that you don't get a lease up front and then develop. We have to develop first and do all the work, and then we get a lease. So based on that, NOAA even stated in their documents that because we didn't have a lease, the project was not a pre-existing one, and we would be on the, on the construction post the commercial project. So there was a misunderstanding by NOAA in that process, and also they weren't aware that we were in process in state waters for a project, and they stated to the contrary in their regs, which were unfortunate. But they did recognize how they could go through in different alternatives with this project to reach the license. We have since then applied for pre-existing activity because we have done a lot of the work and much more than any of the other developers have done, obviously since 2018. But they didn't recognize that, and we are following the outline process that they have described in the documents.
I'd say, sorry, can I ask him, the more specifically to the loan, and the viability of the project, do you have, first question is, is there a power purchase agreement in place for you to sell the power if you can build the project?
Yeah, so no, there is not. So this is very early stage of the project, but, and this is something that maybe Philippe can talk more about, but we did sign an MOU with CCP, where we are working together to look at this, and where the outcome is the plan for a PPA. And if that would not work, then obviously we have the central procurement, the AB 1073, I think it's called, is not, anyway, it's the central procurement by the California Water Management Authority, that they would centrally procure it and then allocate the cost on the collective. But that's sort of the last route. But I'll pass to you, Philip, maybe say a few words on that relationship we have.
Yeah, so California Community Power has been engaged with CODIMO for about 2 years now. We have the MOU in place with them. Our members have expressed interest in procurement of offshore wind. And while CODIMO is rather early in its development process to consider a power purchase agreement, based upon our expectations of the costs associated with the project, and given the tremendous amount of community engagement and approach for trying to do development in a very conscientious manner to the local community and the environment and the stakeholder engagement that's been done, our members, RCEA included, have an interest in negotiating a power purchase agreement. We do expect that the cost will be well above market relative to the market value of the energy capacity and renewable energy credits from the project. And so part of what we are also exploring is whether there is an avenue to get grant funding opportunities from the California Energy Commission or otherwise to help mitigate some of the above market costs. But all in, California Community Power and its members do have an interest in a power purchase agreement from the CODIMO project. And yeah, happy to address any other questions.
No, I have other questions, but not along those lines. Does anyone? So what's at stake, and what is the loan doing for you? What's the deadline? What are the implications if the funding's not in place by the deadline?
Yeah, so we have been working since beginning of the year in the fact that since the White House executive orders came in, it did curveball our funding completely. We had a funding partner that withdrew, and we're sort of a very powerful engine to run these kind of projects. So, but we don't have a large amount of funds. So for the last 18 months, basically, we have been without funding for the project. So I have funded the project, and we're reaching the point where, yeah, we don't have funds to put forward this security. And that's why we have reached out. Also, Labor is working on a state and CEC funding package, but that will take longer for us. That will be later in the year before we will get that far. So yeah, if we don't post the funding, that means we're in default and we will lose the interconnection. That's basically it.
I think the position that, we were taking was, given this activity going on with labor and this package that's trying to be negotiated, is there value that we see in posting this that could buy them that time to knowing that they don't have it to post now? And so the due date is July 24th for this first posting. The recommendation is to offer, for simple terms, we're calling it a loan, but it's more like an escrow posting of this, a security posting of it. So we would post that through only as late as December 12th, which is when their next interconnection fee becomes due, with the idea that if they have not got this agreement worked out with labor and the CEC and funds are not flowing, it's time to kind of cut the losses at that point. So this is, really coming as sort of a last ditch effort. If we want to keep this project alive, we have an opportunity to do that. I think the project is, just being frank, very much at risk. The goal I've been trying to achieve in the last week is really understanding, is this money at very much risk? Like, how risky is this for RCEA? And I think what I've concluded is, based on the information I've received from PG&E, is that it's very low risk. It is a security deposit that we put in an escrow account. All signs point to that we keep control of that, and we can withdraw it if the project is not going to move forward. Today, we just received indication that there's not a barrier to us posting that on behalf of the Cademo Corporation. So what that means is we could have that escrow account direct with PG&E, and we would get control over when to pull it back. So that's really what we're talking about. Now, what I would want the ad hoc to be absolutely certain of is that assumption, that we're receiving from PG&E staff has been legally reviewed as well. And it's not just, PG&E staff saying, yes, this is how it works, and I can assure you of that, but we have some other confirmation that it's not, that it is a very, very low risk situation for this deposit to be posted. It's also a very short duration, and I would not recommend extending beyond that at this time.
Any further discussion? Before we take out the public? Nobody.
It looks like maybe like a maximum 35,000, sorry, could be because of that would be possibly non-refundable, because we do want to make sure that the lawyers are looking at it.
Yes, thank you. That is a good point. We would have expenses to draw up the legal terms, and we would cover that. So we could potentially get that recouped. It's a relatively small amount compared to the overall amount, and it is within the budget. We have budget set aside every year for CC Power projects. So it would fall under that budget line item, a continuation of this project. But yes, there would be that expense that we would not expect to be recouped.
All good questions, Michael.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's kind of like, so nice not to have to be on the cutting edge for a change. So go forward. I'm good on it.
Right.
So it says here ad hoc committee would be formed and to approve loan terms consistent with board recommendations. But this money would need to be essentially secured before the next board meeting?
Yes. So, and if we could go one back to so we've got revised action language since the staff report was posted. And so the idea would be to authorize this expenditure and the posting, and to form the ad hoc that would make sure that all of the terms are in place. And I would say we could add to that any of the things from the discussion today in terms of, authorizing the ad hoc or giving direction to the ad hoc to, include, community benefits for our specific to workforce or the things that have been mentioned. But yes, the second this security posting is essentially due the day of our next board meeting, which is why we're asking for the ad hoc, because I know you all have meetings, but forming a special meeting before the next one, I would say is nearly impossible to get a quorum before, given the time of year and just how hard it is even not during the summer. So the idea is form the ad hoc with these very specific instructions, and then pending legal review, they would be able to give authority to the ED to execute the documents. And so and looking at that, we would also want to have those members selected today. And I think the meeting would be the week of July 14th, would be the latest we could hold that meeting.
How many members do we need?
I think we can have as many as are interested, as long as we don't go over quorum, right?
Correct,
Do we need at least 3? I don't know if there's a minimum.
No, there's no minimum.
Okay, well, I would prefer more than one. So, but yes, as long as we don't have a quorum, that would be the maximum.
And just a reminder with ad hoc, there can be informal communication, so there can be emails and we can meet remotely if that works with people's schedules. So there's a little bit more flexibility in meeting.
So then do we need to first approve and then develop an ad hoc, or after approval?
I would suggest that. So I would suggest it runs across 2 slides, so make sure you are cluing into that, the updated recommended action. I would suggest create it and then populate it. You can also populate it at the same time and create one motion.
Who wants to do that?
You call it chair. Yeah, move staff motion with the members being that. Do that.
It may be overly protective, but can we add some language to this that says, that makes clear we don't have to provide the loan?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
The loan,
Yeah, approve or reject.
approve or reject, yeah, I mean, depending on the terms that we negotiate.
Decline, I think.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
what you're
Yeah.
saying.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, the intent is that if we did not have terms that were agreeable, we wouldn't enter into it. So I think adding that language to be explicit is very helpful.
Okay, so how do we do that? Do I?
Approve or create an ad hoc board subcommittee to approve or decline to approve.
And so have you just rewritten it, and are we voting on that now, or do?
You've just rewritten it. You vote on whatever motion you want, but that's the suggestion, I would say.
Okay.
With that.
Go for it.
You can say move staff recommendation with the addition of what we just discussed. And then also, I think there was the additional point made about the inclusion of the local Humboldt resources in, and I don't know how that would be worded. So we might need some wordsmithing on that.
Yeah, I think there it would be good to direct us to at least explore it. And yeah, I don't know if we can, kind of get to a final terms of outcome of that, but we would want to come up with some guardrails around it that we want to, be working towards that. And I don't know how to firm that up.
Oh, and I may just suggest, with the short timeline of this deposit and, of executing it, and then also the duration of it, the direction might be more long-term for RCA staff to look at community benefits such as local workforce development.
Yeah.
If we enter into PPAs down the road, or, like to incorporate with future agreements for this project. It might, I like it, but it might be hard to incorporate it in the next 3 weeks.
Yeah. Somebody want to give it a shot?
So the motion, you're looking for a
I'm
motion?
looking for a motion.
Okay, so I will try. So there's 2 slides. There's the first slide.
Yeah.
So let's see, we're authorizing the expenditure not to exceed that amount for this posting. And the next slide. And to create an ad hoc board subcommittee to approve or decline these ABC things. Yeah? That work?
Okay. Oh, yeah. You have a second? Oh, yeah, thank you. Any further discussion? All right, those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right. Motion carries.
Okay, so who wants to be on that hop?
Dude.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. Anybody else?
I'll do it.
I will. Oh,
You will too? Sure. Need another meeting. I'll do it.
be remote.
And Elise, right? You got Elise.
Mhm.
You see?
Is it, you want to do it, right?
Yes.
Oh, you guys are, there's three of you. I think that's great. That's a great option.
Did we lose one? I thought we had four.
Yeah, so I had four.
Oh.
Can't be on the other
Okay, can I just clarify, is it Director Garachi, Scafani, and Chair Bauer? Oh, Vice Chair Wu, okay, thank you.
Right.
Yay.
Thank you.
Mike.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah, so I just want to extend our appreciation. I mean, we are obviously in a very critical phase, and the fact that you're stepping up to the plate and you are supporting us with this is, and I just want to say we're here, we're transparent, we're genuine. So, you know, if there's any questions anybody may have, you know, we're always around to answer, and we will even come up and sit down with you, and, you know, whatever is needed to help you, help us, whatever, just to make sure that the doors are open, and we're looking forward to work with you.
Thank you. Really. All right. Moving on.
We're going, yeah.
11.2.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you.
11.2 Northern Rural Energy Network Efficiency Program Implementation Contracts, and I believe Stephen or Lori.
I'm gonna give this one, we'll
Okay.
try to make it quick. So, yeah, we've been, you know, everyone's been getting updates about this program, the Northern Rural Energy Network. We are getting to a point with our partners where we are very close to executing an implementation contract. We have been working off of, we've been calling it like a pre-launch contract with us, which authorizes some activities, but doesn't allow for full implementation. So we are very close to agreement with our partners on this, but we don't have the exact contract to put before you. But we are on a time-sensitive situation in that the pre-launch contracts are going to expire on June 30th. So what we're asking for, consistent with these revised terms or the material terms that you've received as a supplemental attachment to the staff report, that you would authorize the executive director to enter into these implementation contracts consistent with these material terms. And of course, pending Nancy's review. And she.
Is this also 2 slides?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
No, but there was more to the material term.
Yeah, they have that. I left off sort of the general beginning of, it's, you know, it goes through 2027. I left off the parts of the material terms. They're on your sheet, but not on the slide. The sort of, you know, who's the general pieces of it. But I think the parts we've been really deeply engaged with our partners on and have come to agreement on is really surrounding insurance limits and how much insurance we need everyone to carry, and also giving us the added protection of naming RCEA as an additional insured. We'd have indemnification up to those identified insurance limits. Subcontractors would carry insurance at those governing partner limits consistent with what's above. And then at the discretion of the governing partner, we could require more if for some reason we felt like that subcontractor was going to be engaged in higher risk activities. And then again, naming RCEA as an additional insured and indemnifying RC. And then there was a request to change the venue. Typically, we have the venue as the Humboldt County Courts. There was a request to change that to Sacramento, given that this is, you know, a very large initiative covering a wide region of rural California. Sacramento is not actually in any of our specific territories, so it's a pretty neutral spot. So we didn't see issue with that. I will say Nancy has been working very hard to, you know, work these terms out with the various legal counsels, and I think, you know, we're very close. So the action is on the next slide, which would be to approve these material terms. Again, they're in full in your staff report supplemental. And then that's the general partners agreement. These agreements would last through December 2027. They would have a not to exceed amount for task orders through December 2025. So new task orders would be issued in 2026. The amounts for the individual partners are listed there. And so the action then concludes with authorizing the executive director to sign those pending Nancy Diamond's legal review.
Yes, Natalie.
The part about the microloans and the financing for the customers of these agencies, whether it's commercial or residential, caught my eye as like a potential, like I know that there's subcontractor language here. That would be like, it just seems like there could be a very large number of potential recipients of funding and subcontractors and contractors implementing those projects for residential and commercial customers. And I'm just curious how we kind of cover our butts in that situation. Do we ask that they use a template for working with those folks? Does that expose us in any way by, maybe that's a real into the weeds legal question, but it just seems like there's a lot of potential implementing ways because of that.
There are, yeah. And I think, and we could have Stephen come up, we talk more, but we're ways off from implementing that. That is one of the later implementation items. So I think we still have a ways to go on how those agreements would look. And you'll see, like, even on our consent agenda today, we had other contracts coming before you. So I think this is not the end all be all of NREN contracts. It is, creating the overall guidance, but if individual implementation programs require more review, we will do it as we get to there as part of the design of those. Does that sound?
Yeah, so the individual task orders come with a very hefty set of program requirements.
Okay.
And those are largely driven by the state requirements, the CPUC requirements. And my guess is that the details that work around how microloans are established will be embedded, if they're not already in the program requirements. They will be embedded in the individual task orders.
Okay.
And I think Beth is right that we're not at the microloan stage yet. Right, Stephen?
Yes, I think that is a perfect explanation.
All right, any more questions? No public comments. Can I get a motion? Probably just say approve that recommendation if you want. Second. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. 11.3, RePower local procurement goal, Jocelyn.
Good afternoon, board members, or evening, I guess we can now. So it's been a while since I've talked to you. My name is Jocelyn Gwynn, Senior Power Resources Manager. Richard is on a much-deserved vacation, so you got me today for this one. Next slide. I guess I can do that myself here. So I'm going to talk to you about our local procurement goal that's in our strategic plan. This is a fairly lofty goal that we established when we updated the plan in 2019. At the time, if you can all remember back to that age-old time, this goal seemed, fairly aggressive, but still achievable. It sets forth a requirement or a target that our power mix on an annual basis consists of 100% local renewable resources. Staff deem, many changes have taken place since 2019. So staff no longer deem this goal feasible or financially prudent. So at the time in 2019, we were negotiating a contract with CEREMONIAL for the onshore wind project, which failed. At the time, we're projecting that offshore wind would be online in Humboldt County in 2026. That is now, significantly delayed. And this was, of course, pre-COVID as well. So a lot of changes to supply chain and project delays coming through the pandemic. And we're bringing this goal to you kind of in isolation in advance of a holistic strategic plan update, because this really does affect our day-to-day procurement And we also will be updating our 10-year integrated resource plan to the CPUC, which we use, as a very holistic, procurement document later this year. So this goal will affect, how the analysis is done for that. So we do express a preference for local resources in all of our solicitations for power projects. And we do award points to projects that are located here in Humboldt versus non-local resources. But that hasn't really been enough. And we have contracted some local projects as well. But that, as you can see, hasn't really gotten us there. Of the 60% of our annual energy needs that we have under long-term contracts, about 22% is coming from local resources, some of which are online and some of which are under construction and some of which are still in negotiation. So about 18% of that 22 is coming from the Scotia biomass facility, which that contract expires in 2031. So if we don't re-up that contract, then our local percentage would drop down to 4%, coming from solar resources, namely our microgrid. At the airport, we also have the Foster Clean Power hybrid solar and storage projects being built that should be online this summer. They're in the Arcata area. And then we have North Coast Highway Solar, our feed-in tariff projects being built. They actually started construction this week, which we're very excited about. They should be online in Hydesville later this year. And then we have a couple shortlisted projects coming out of our most recent solicitation that Beth will touch on in her ED report. So this is kind of a brief laundry list of the challenges we face to procuring local resources. One, or really to hitting that 100% local goal. One very obvious one is that we now have long-term contracts for non-local resources, namely Sandrini, which is making up about the lion's share of that 40% that we have contracted through non-local projects. And then we also have seen local projects that we've had under contract fail, or that we were negotiating contracts for, the onshore wind being that one. And then the offshore wind delay that we're seeing currently. And so I think a lot of this has contributed to fewer developers showing interest in building in Humboldt. Namely, there's high cost of building here for labor and materials. The developers who are building projects that I listed here, they've told us they're really not making any money on those projects, whether you believe them or not. They mostly are in these projects to build a relationship with RCEA and to build their portfolio. And then we do have, significant transmission constraints, as you all know, coming into Humboldt, and that limits power projects' ability to get an allocation for and deliver resource adequacy. Just kind of a brief reminder, resource adequacy is an important, product that power plants can deliver, and load serving entities like RCEA have to procure for the state's reliability program. And so if a resource is not able to deliver, its capacity on call when called upon by the grid operator to the broader grid, if there's a transmission constraint between that project and the broader grid, then it won't get what's called a deliverability allocation, and it won't be able to provide that resource adequacy, which is really affects the value of these projects for RCEA. It's one of 3 major value streams that we look at when we're evaluating the cost efficacy of these projects. And then, lastly, we did some analysis that I'm going to talk about on the next slide to demonstrate just the premium that local projects have costed. These are based on both contracted resources and offers that we've received. So we brought this item to the CAC, and we did not provide this kind of cost analysis, and they gave us some feedback that we really should quantify what this premium is. And so we looked at all of the offers and contracted resources that we've received throughout the course of the CCA program, and saw that local solar projects cost about 3 times more than non-local, and local energy storage projects, the vast majority of those batteries costing about 70% more than non-local. We didn't look so much at other technologies because those other technologies are not really being built and offered in Humboldt County right now. We obviously hope that they will in the future and have that in our strategic plan, but this was mostly a solar and storage analysis. So because of these challenges, we are proposing a revision to the strategic plan. We tried to take as light of a pen as we could here. And so the good news is that we are on track, and we do think it's financially feasible for us to be 100% renewable on an annual basis by 2030. But we are proposing to remove the local component of that. And then we drafted a sort of more brief or generalized, I guess, goal related to local development, recognizing that the board probably would still want to have, some prioritization for local resources, but without that time constraint and without the percentage target. And I just want to point out that there was a little discrepancy in the staff report and the addendum that is an attachment. I think Lori fixed it. So that if you looked at the packet, kind of when it was first published, it didn't include that the last sentence there on the new local renewable. Is my last slide. Happy to take any questions.
So Jocelyn, with like the thousands of solar homes and businesses that we have in Humboldt County, does any of that go towards our local portfolio?
So this is more on the kind of front of the meter supply side of things, that those behind the meter solar resources are really just reducing our load that we have to meet with supply side resources. So this is only applicable to, front of the meter projects.
Could we be the virtual power plant to be in front of the meter, or do what you're saying is, I don't know, we were using swell energy at one time. Can we continue that program to encourage more rooftop solar? Because it's much easier to install on rooftops and buildings than, a farm in, Lolita or whatever.
We certainly could emphasize, launch another program for a virtual power plant. I will say just that there will always be some load that we need to meet. So because this is on a percentage basis, it's really just looking at that load that we need to meet through front of the supply. But certainly that would help reduce the actual volume of megawatt hours that we need to go out and procure.
So we have public comment on this that came in from email. And so the issue, if I understand the comments right, is about the word clean. And can we address that? Because I'm not saying in the marked up version here that we have, I don't see that we've stricken clean out, but can you tell me about that? Or tell me about that.
I think what they've got is 2 different goals. So I think the commenter is referring to 100% clean and renewable energy by 2025 is a separate goal than we're looking at amending here.
Okay.
But I do see later in their comment, they are suggesting that, without necessarily giving us like a red line of their interpretation, that they would like clean to be in here. And I think their point is that if we add clean, we would essentially be committing to not renewing the biomass contract when it comes up. And I think with the language we have, I don't know that adding clean would necessarily prevent us from still making that choice down the line because it still involves, things being financially prudent and we need to make those decisions. So I'm not sure that, we need to wordsmith that a little bit. But I do think they've taken a different goal and wanting to insert some of that language into this revised version.
Okay.
And can we go back to the slide that shows the language, please, Lori?
And just to add to that, when we say, so our 2025 goal, which is, this is not amending or affecting at all, is that includes clean and renewable resources, and that's meant to be a broader definition to include large hydro, carbon-free power, as well as nuclear. So the renewable, 2030 renewable goal is actually more aggressive because it phases out that procurement of large hydro. And so that's why clean is not really included here. It's typically when we say clean, it's like a colloquial version of that carbon-free power, which is large hydro and nuclear.
Thank you.
I don't see the word clean in here anywhere. I guess
They want us to add,
they want us to add,
right? That's,
But
it's not in there.
to what Jocelyn's saying is when we refer to clean, we're using the state definition of clean, which is, I don't think the intent of the public comments. I mean, the definition of clean means large hydro or nuclear could be identified as clean.
Yeah, so because biomass is considered renewable by state definition, it is included in the renewable goal. And I think that public comment was thinking that if we add clean and renewable, then it removes biomass from the equation, but that is not the case.
It removes biomass?
I think that's what the public commenter was thinking, but that wouldn't be the case. If we added clean to this, it would just include large hydro and nuclear. It wouldn't remove biomass.
Okay.
Clean is also a sub-definition or it's a part of renewable as a broader definition, right?
Hydro isn't renewable, I don't think. Large hydro.
Yeah, correct, which is why when we add clean, it adds the ability to procure large hydro.
Right.
So it's there's sort of two separate buckets of resources that are non-fossil.
Well, large hydro is clean. It's just not considered renewable by somebody's standard.
So the language of net zero carbon emission, is that, I was looking for the state's definition of that. I'm interested to know what it is because it looks like a list, but it's not always, maybe it's more defined somewhere else that I'm looking, but is there a clear, good definition for net zero carbon emission renewable sources?
That's a very good question.
That may be a different,
That's what we're being asked to, what we're just
in the top.
Oh, I see. You mean
a
for that
change
whole
to it,
term,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we're keeping that, I kind of want to know what it means.
Yeah, so I think the state does define biomass and geothermal as net zero carbon emissions. I don't know about geothermal. Let's strike that from the record. But because the bioenergy emissions that are associated with actually burning the woody material or methane is counted upstream of the power sector. So it's actually counted in the forestry sector or whatever, industry that feedstock is coming from. And so that is, I personally think it's problematic language to call biomass net zero carbon emissions because there are emissions associated with the diesel required to warm up the plant. And so there are some non-biogenic emissions associated with biomass that I think is how the state defines it. We could look more into that, but we wanted to kind of leave the language as alone as possible. That could be a good discussion though for the strategic plan update.
I think it would be getting into the nitty gritty of all these is probably like pretty important for our community and each of us. I'm all for like removing local and saying we really intend to be local as much as possible, which it seems like that's the intent of today's discussion. But I'm very curious about what net zero carbon emission and whether we can tie that to some state standards or what, and, you know, getting into how these definitions might have changed over time. I also, like, in just a cursory look at that, it looked like nuclear is still considered a net zero.
But it's not renewable.
But it's not renewable. So I just want to be like, I think we last time we talked about nuclear, we wanted to be abundantly clear that we're not incentivizing any development of new nuclear facilities. So anyway, sounds like we're gonna have fun with strategic.
Well,
planning.
this isn't talking about nuclear in this resolution.
Correct. Well, it might nebulously talk about it when we say all these, the jargon that we're trying to decipher right now, but.
Might be handy to include a glossary of terms and definitions when we talk about this stuff, and maybe also put it on the website somewhere.
Yes, great.
That's so, yeah.
I think there is a glossary in the strategic plan, if I'm not mistaken, but there's not, we will add it.
I think giving up local is just kind of giving up. I mean, we should at least say 30% local in 2030 or some goal, because we're at 4% right now. I mean,
22, but 18% of that is biomass. And I think that's like really the sticking point of like, is that contract going to be renewed in 2031? If we're talking about what truly is, you know, carbon free, and that's a huge chunk of our local. So if you pull that away, we're not even, you know, it was like 4% or something. And so, you know, when you're thinking about the entire mix of power and just how truly expensive it is to build things here, how, again, and this is our job to advocate to the rest of our municipalities and whatnot, but like how hard it is to get projects approved, even though we want this to be a priority, it's just not. Also just thinking about like our customers' rates, if we're paying, you know, 70% more to build storage projects up here, it's just not feasible to have it even be, I mean, even be 30% local, because unless we're the ones building it, but then, you know, we need massive amounts of money for infrastructure and land and all of these different pieces, so.
When you said these things were this percent more expensive, you meant to build, not for us to buy that power once it's produced, but
no, that's for us to buy it. So that's based on the prices that our CEA staff are, you know, seeing in our solicitations.
Okay. Of course, we have no idea, sorry, we have no idea what the markup is on it, right?
Correct, yeah. Yeah, that's all very, it's that very close to their.
Right.
Oh, I just, to Director Tuttle's comment, I just want to say that I don't, this is one place where we talk about local, but there are others, and it gets a little more specific to wind. But in terms of like not giving up on local, we still have other policies that really make, you know, wind, but also all, you know, renewable energy, a cornerstone of our local economy. So I think, and I think some of that is in the staff report, but just saying that we're not giving up on local. But we want to be able to have those avenues to continue advocating for ways to make it more affordable, to take care of some of our transmission issues so that we could get RA for it. You know, there's steps we can be taking, and we want to be working on all of those fronts. And I think the other pieces of the strategic plan get us there. And so it's not a giving up. It's just a specific part that's kind of interfering with like, okay, how do we start procuring power when this is the guidance, but we know it's incredibly expensive and we need to get a contract for like the next 5 years. So I think that's just the context. And I want to make it very clear, like we are still, you know, in our current strategic plan, advocating for this to be a cornerstone of our economy and to make sure that clean energy is, in its most colloquial term, all encompassing of all the great energy, you know, what we're striving for.
We adopt another virtual power plant for our community. No. Swell Energy was providing a great opportunity to go local, and then they went out under, and we could find another.
Yeah, I jotted that down. We'll definitely report back on that and status. And I think there's some other players that have proposed some things recently, so we can get back to you on that.
Yeah, I think it's a shared frustration of us that we can't do more locally, you know, but at this point, just need renewable energy wherever we get it. And then it becomes really a transmission issue, right? Getting it here. I mean, I think this makes sense. And I think strategic planning will help us flesh it out more, and look at our path in the future. Yeah, I think of course, all that we all want local.
I mean, I'm living and breathing what I'm teaching. I have 60 solar panels on my house. I drive 2 electric cars. I don't have gas. I don't have a gas bill, gasoline bill. I send more to the grid than I'm consuming. And I'm just one person. Everyone could do that.
And it's also not financially feasible for everybody to be able to do that. And unless, it's subsidized. It's definitely our federal government isn't going to subsidize that. So it's awesome, but it's not everybody's reality.
It's a legitimate form of local power production though. And like we do have a net metering option, right? That would be more incentivized than what the state is allowing right now. So I would just say like, maybe just for me, strive to is just not enough because we're already doing it in those ways, and we can just be more committal than strive to, continue to lead in or something like that. Because I think the commitment is clear. So I would suggest it's an edit, strive to and do. Will.
The number of times I've been in a meeting where we have said to change strive to will, it happens more often than you think. And government likes to use the word strive, but yeah.
Great. Yeah.
We'll do it.
I will say, to your point, in our discussions, we came up at the staff level with a lot of these same ideas of like, well, could we set a target? But there's a lot of factors, like when you set a target, not looking at like, what is our financial outlook at the time, or what would that do to rates? So it's hard to do it without looking at it as a whole picture. But we did think like, if we weren't paying a premium for local, could we then spend those funds locally to help encourage the virtual power plant option? So that was one of the ideas we had, that if we weren't spending that on a PPA locally, how can we then in turn put those cost savings back into the community? So I think we're having the same conversations at the staff level that you're having here at the board level.
I wasn't aware of the virtual power plant activities, and also any relationship that we may have had with Swell prior, but I wonder what was Swell doing that we can't do on our own?
I think we can, and other CCAs are doing a similar model on their own. I think it was an opportunity to kind of outsource the outreach and the uptake of the battery system. And it just, failed for a number of reasons. But there are other CCAs doing similar programs that we're starting to look at to see if we could model something similar.
So it was their finance scheme. Basically, they brought financing.
Well, it's a little bit more because they control the battery based on what the needs are of the grid. And so that's a fairly complex system that RCEA doesn't actually have in-house. So it would take partnering with someone who says like, this is when you're charging your battery and this is when you're offloading into the grid to meet the needs of what RCEA needs. I will say, it's not always a super popular program because people put in this big investment and then they lose control of that investment because you're signing off that control to meet our needs versus their needs. So it would, I think, take a lot more community education and outreach to make it a successful program.
Yeah, just to add that we actually initially had a resource adequacy contract with Swell. So they were actually on the hook not only to aggregate the batteries and operate them as a virtual power plant, but to register them and maintain that status with CAISO and be on the hook for any penalties if those resources didn't deliver when called upon. So it was a lot of kind of more complex tasks that, RCEA could do if we hired staff, but we just wanted a more turnkey program at the time.
Definitely worth exploring.
All right.
I'll move the recommendation as presented.
Striking.
With striking strive two.
Excuse me, did we cover enough of public comment, just taking the written? Did we go through?
I'll second that.
All right.
Yeah.
We have a motion already. The second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Jocelyn.
Thank you.
Staff reports, item 12.
Hey. Let's go, Lori, there's actually slides for this, but they're so quick. I wanted to report back on the RFO for midterm reliability. This was, we had the solicitation out, it closed. We are now in exclusivity agreements with two shortlisted companies, the Hatchery Road Solar Plus Storage and the Flycatcher Energy Storage. So I just wanted to show the locations. The process for this is essentially, we're sort of in negotiations due diligence phase right now. In several months, once we get through all of that, contracts would come before the board. So that's when you'd see this, but there has been a lot of interest. So we wanted to just let everybody know sort of who was shortlisted. And if there's one more slide, I think that shows a little bit more detail. So the Hatchery Road site in Blue Lake and then the Fairhaven site. So those are two shortlisted projects. That shortlist will go up on our website tomorrow. And then, as I said, once we get through negotiations, we'll be bringing it back to the board. And there was an ad hoc subcommittee formed for this. So they've been consulted and informed and guiding this process as well.
And Hatchery Road's been around a long time, right?
Yeah, so that one has not developed, but a permitted solar project. So they will need a modification to their use permit to add battery storage and build it. But it seemed like a fairly straightforward change to the use permit.
Excellent. Any questions?
That's in Fairhaven, is that?
Yeah.
Fairhaven Power Plant?
Yeah.
Call it that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the last announcement is just that we are having a battery storage informational workshop on July 23rd. That's that right? 5:30. It's been a long meeting. I'm like, to get my dates right. 5:30 at the D Street Community Center in Arcata. So we'll get more information out, but just keep that one tagged, and we'll soon be doing a lot more advertising around that. Just trying to provide some information to address concerns we've heard, just particular to battery storage, not specific to any project, but just generally what the technology is about and what it can do.
And we do have a announcement on our website for that, so.
That's it.
All right. Thank you. Any future agenda items that you want to bring up? Are we good? Are we worn out? All right. Well, with that, our next regular meeting will be Thursday, July 24th, 3:30 p.m. here, and we can adjourn.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.